What if I told you that there was a single government agency that generated $75.6 billion in economic output last year, supported over 300,000 jobs across all 50 states, and delivered a 300% return on investment? You'd probably say that's a pretty good deal, right? But recently, I've been hearing more and more that NASA isn't worth it. And you know what? I get it. When you see a $25 billion budget line item without understanding the value that it really provides, I can see how it might look like a luxury expense. The most common criticisms I hear are we should spend that money on Earth problems first, space is a luxury we can't afford, or private companies can do it cheaper now. These are legitimate concerns that taxpayers should have about any government program. So today, I'm going to answer them. To understand NASA's value today, we need to start with its foundational design, a value creation model that has deep roots going back over a century. NASA's predecessor, the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, or NACA, was established in 1915 and already had a robust industry collaboration model. NACA would conduct cutting-edge aeronautics research and then share those findings with aircraft manufacturers. They created infrastructure, standards, and the workforce for the budding aviation industry. This partnership approach helped establish American dominance in aviation. And while most people think of NASA and think of space, they still conduct advanced research in aviation technologies, like supersonics and electric aviation. After the USSR launched Sputnik, the US decided it needed to take space more seriously, so NASA was created in 1958. The Space Act explicitly mandated two things that are crucial to understanding the value today: technology transfer and international cooperation. These were baked into the agency's DNA from day one. The idea was simple. NASA would push the boundaries of what's possible and then ensure those breakthroughs benefited everyone. It started with a government-led model where NASA did everything in-house and evolved to today's government-enabled approach, where NASA catalyzes an entire ecosystem of innovation. And this model has always delivered returns. A 1971 Chase econometric study of the Apollo program found that for every dollar invested in NASA, the economy saw $7 in return. But what did that actually look like? Well, for example, Apollo engineers developed miniaturized computers for spacecraft. Then those same engineers founded companies that brought personal computers to American homes. The guidance systems that landed us on the moon became the foundation for everything from ATMs to early video games. That's not just an effect on aerospace. That technology reaches across many sectors of the economy. Here's what I want you to understand. NASA isn't a cost to the American economy. It's an economic engine. To do that, let's look at some more up-to-date numbers. In fiscal year 2023, 17,823 full-time equivalent jobs existed directly inside NASA. But here's the multiplier. For every single full-time job at NASA, 16 additional jobs are created throughout the US economy. I'll say that again. One NASA engineer supports 16 other American workers. This means NASA supported 304,803 jobs nationwide. And these aren't just any jobs. When taking into account both wages and benefits, the average job supported by NASA pays $90,547 annually. That's 24% above the national average. NASA civil servant jobs themselves average $197,283, which is 269% of the national average. These are high-skilled, high-paying careers that drive economic growth. But it doesn't stop at jobs. NASA also generated $9.6 billion in tax revenue in 2023. That's federal, state, and local taxes directly funding the services that we all rely on: schools, infrastructure, public safety. Let me give you two specific examples of NASA programs which drive this economic engine. First, the Moon to Mars campaign, NASA's flagship human exploration program. In 2023 alone, this generated $23.8 billion in economic output and supported nearly 100,000 jobs. It also contributed $2.9 billion in tax revenues. That's from one program. And like Apollo, who knows what kind of technologies NASA will develop in this pursuit that will enable huge economic growth. Second, NASA's climate change research and technology investments yielded $7.9 billion in economic output and supported 32,900 jobs while contributing $1 billion in tax revenues. The data and technology directly addresses problems here on Earth, like agriculture optimization, national security, and public health. This impact isn't just felt in a few cities or states. In fact, NASA's economic impact touches all 50 states. Even states without major NASA facilities benefit through contracts, research partnerships, and supply chains. NASA's $23.3 billion in procurement spending involves most categories of manufacturing and service industries across the country. 45 states see economic benefits that are over $10 million annually. But the economic numbers only tell part of the story. NASA's mandate to widely disseminate its technologies has created a revolution in how space research improves life on Earth. Since 1976, NASA has published annual spin-off reports documenting technologies that have been commercialized from space research. They've chronicled over 2,000 breakthroughs so far. Let me give you some examples. First, medical imaging. NASA's digital signal processing breakthrough came during the Apollo missions, when engineers needed to computer-enhance pictures of the moon and identify imperfections in space components. That same digital image technology became the foundation for modern medical diagnostic tools. Today, millions of MRI and CT scans worldwide use imaging techniques that trace their origins back to those Apollo-era innovations. Second, LASIK eye surgery. The precision required to align the James Webb Space Telescope's mirrors to within nanometers led NASA to develop incredibly accurate measurement systems. That same mirror testing technology is now incorporated into Johnson & Johnson's eye design systems, which creates high-definition maps of patients' eyes for LASIK surgery. The technology that helps us see the first stars in the universe is now helping millions of people see here on Earth. Third, air purification. NASA needed to prevent ethylene buildup during long-term space missions, so they partnered with University of Wisconsin-Madison to develop advanced air purification technology. That technology is now used by consumers and organizations worldwide to clean indoor air. And that came in handy when we got hit with a pandemic. Unsurprisingly, these technologies are also used in commercial space. For example, phenolic impregnated carbon ablator, or PICA, was developed at NASA Ames Research Center as a heat protection material for spacecraft reentry. Today, companies like Varda Space Industries use PICA-based materials to return manufactured products from space back to Earth safely. In fiscal year 2023 alone, NASA reported 15,064 new technology disclosures, was issued 69 patents, and filed for 40 more. Each of these represents potential commercial opportunities across industries like telecommunications, energy, healthcare, and agriculture. But the list goes much deeper. NASA spin-offs include Tempur-Pedic foam, originally developed for space shuttle astronauts, scratch-resistant lenses, rescue equipment that helps find earthquake survivors buried under rubble, water purification systems for challenging environments, powdered lubricants for use inside advanced engines, thermoelectric de-icing systems for aircraft, and fire-resistant materials. Every U.S. commercial aircraft and air traffic control tower uses NASA-developed technology. The GPS system you rely on daily has NASA accuracy improvements. The smartphone you're probably watching this video on uses NASA-developed sensors. My point is, these technologies touch virtually every aspect of modern life. Now, some people argue that private companies can do space cheaper and more efficiently than NASA. And you know what? They're absolutely right. But here's what they're missing. NASA created the commercial space industry. The 1990 NASA Authorization Act explicitly directed NASA to seek and encourage the fullest commercial use of space, and to use commercially provided space services and hardware. This was a fundamental shift from NASA as owner and operator to NASA as advisor and customer. Let me walk you through how this transformation happened. The Commercial Orbital Transportation Services Program, or COTS, was the game changer. Instead of NASA building its own cargo vehicle for the International Space Station, they funded SpaceX and Orbital Sciences to develop commercial solutions. NASA acted as an advisor and requirement setter, not the manufacturer. This approach was so successful that it expanded to commercial crew, finally ending America's dependence on Russian Soyuz capsules. SpaceX was certified to carry NASA astronauts in 2020, and today both SpaceX and Boeing are providing crew transportation services. The model continues with commercial LEO destinations, where NASA is supporting private companies developing space stations to replace the ISS, and commercial lunar payload services, where companies like Firefly Aerospace are delivering payloads to the moon. But NASA doesn't just write checks. They provide enabling infrastructure that's found nowhere else on Earth. SpaceX uses Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center, the same pad that launched Apollo missions. The same pad where Neil Armstrong began humanity's first moon landing is now where private companies launch astronauts to the space station. Every commercial launch carries the legacy of Apollo engineers who designed those systems 50 years ago. Relativity Space and Rocket Lab use test facilities at Stennis Space Center. These are unique, capital-intensive facilities that took decades to build and would be prohibitively expensive for private companies to duplicate. NASA also provides direct technical support. When Intuitive Machines' IM-1 mission needed assistance with lunar landing, NASA experts were there to help. The International Space Station serves as a testbed where commercial companies can test products in microgravity before scaling up for independent missions. The result of all of this? What NASA calls unprecedented levels of private investment in the space sector. NASA created the market conditions that allowed commercial space to flourish. They proved demand, reduced technical risk, and provided the infrastructure foundation that enabled private companies to innovate and compete. NASA currently maintains approximately 2,600 active partnership agreements, and over 80% of NASA's budget flows to industry and academia through various contracts and partnerships. This isn't government competing with private industry. This is government enabling private industry to do things that weren't possible before. And to really hammer this point home, before NASA's commercial partnerships, private sector R&D in space was almost non-existent. Today, new space companies contribute a significant portion of global space-related R&D expenditures, with many innovations being entirely original or privately funded. NASA created the conditions that made private space R&D economically viable, and their infrastructure and expertise still enable it today. NASA doesn't just benefit today's economy, it's building tomorrow's workforce and inspiring breakthrough thinking that drives long-term American competitiveness. NASA invests in learning opportunities from kindergarten through graduate school. At Merritt Island High School in Florida, with the help of 80 students working through the program over 8 years, they built StayingSat, a CubeSat designed to measure launch shock and vibration. Students followed the same rigorous standards and review processes that NASA engineers use, presenting their work to experts at NASA and the US Air Force. One former student parlayed her StayingSat experience into NASA internships and now works full-time at Johnson Space Center. This doesn't just help NASA. Students who participate in NASA educational programs show an 84% interest rate in pursuing STEM careers of any type. As I said, the NASA STEM pipeline isn't limited to high schoolers. NASA also had a direct impact on my own career. NASA is what inspired me to study aerospace. But more importantly, I was lucky enough to secure an internship during my senior year of college through Ames Research Center. Because of this experience, I was able to join MathWorks, where I'm now the product manager for aerospace products. We supply MATLAB, Simulink, and a host of other products to NASA and aerospace companies worldwide for design, analysis, simulation, and code generation. It's rare to find a plane, rocket, or spacecraft flying today which MATLAB hasn't touched. NASA's investment in me as an intern now benefits the entire aerospace ecosystem. And there are thousands of others with stories just like mine. But NASA's impact goes beyond education programs. NASA drives breakthrough thinking across industries. The agency's willingness to tackle seemingly impossible challenges creates a culture of innovation that spreads throughout the aerospace sector and beyond. NASA's wider cultural impact shouldn't be underestimated. The agency's social media presence garners millions of views by giving Mars rovers personalities and sharing the wonder of space exploration. NASA has won 37 Webby Awards and an Emmy for its public engagement efforts. This cultural influence inspires entrepreneurs, engineers, and innovators worldwide. Finally, there's workforce mobility. Highly skilled NASA civil servants often transition to founding or working for commercial aerospace companies, transferring critical knowledge and experience into private industry. This workforce distribution amplifies NASA's impact across the entire aerospace ecosystem. NASA's value also extends beyond America's borders through international cooperation that was mandated from the agency's very beginning. The 1958 Space Act explicitly requires NASA to cooperate with nations and groups of nations. Today, NASA manages over 750 international agreements with 125 different countries. This isn't just feel good diplomacy, it's strategic capability sharing that benefits everyone involved. The International Space Station is the flagship example. This involves 15 nations and 5 space agencies in the largest peacetime international collaboration in history. Partners share costs, contribute unique capabilities, and conduct research that benefits all humanity. The James Webb Space Telescope is another great example. The Canadian Space Agency provided critical instruments, while the European Space Agency contributed the launch vehicle and additional instrumentation. No single country could have built the James Webb Space Telescope alone, but together we created humanity's most powerful space telescope. And the Artemis Accords represent the next evolution, a framework for international cooperation in lunar exploration that establishes principles for peaceful, sustainable space activities. But the benefits flow back to Earth in tangible ways. NASA's climate data for Earth-observing satellites is shared freely and openly with the world, though the current administration is seeking to change that. When natural disasters strike anywhere on the planet, NASA's monitoring systems help with prediction and response. The GPS improvements NASA developed benefit global navigation. Water and air purification technologies help developing regions access clean resources. NASA technologies help the US and the rest of the world right here on Earth. NASA also sets technical standards that enable global interoperability. The International Docking Standard ensures that spacecraft from different countries can work together. NASA's role in spacecraft collision analysis helps protect the space environment for all nations to use. Through cost-sharing models and no exchange of funds agreements, international partnerships allow NASA to achieve far more than it could alone, while spreading American technological leadership and values across the world. Now let's directly address those criticisms I mentioned at the beginning. First, the argument that we should spend money on Earth problems instead. NASA satellites help predict hurricanes, track wildfires, and coordinate disaster relief efforts. NASA Earth observation data helps farmers optimize crop yields and manage water resources. NASA technology helps locate groundwater, monitor drought conditions, and develop water purification systems for challenging environments. NASA tracking supports air quality monitoring, disease vector analysis, and environmental health research. NASA developed technologies help locate earthquake survivors, missing aircraft, and ships in distress. The GPS system that keeps global commerce and transportation running has NASA accuracy improvements. This isn't either or. Space research directly addresses Earth problems across every major domain. Second, space is a luxury we can't afford. The latest analysis shows NASA delivers more than a 300% return on investment. But let's talk about the budget reality. NASA generated $9.6 billion in tax revenue in a single year, which covers about 38% of its annual budget directly through taxes alone. When you add the economic multiplier effects, high-skilled job creation, technology transfer licensing revenues, and the long-term economic growth from new industries NASA creates, the total economic value far exceeds the investment. Plus, at less than 0.5% of the federal budget, NASA costs less than Americans spend on pizza annually. When you factor in international cost-sharing partnerships that reduce the burden on American taxpayers, NASA represents extraordinary value for minimal fiscal impact. It's not a luxury, it's a utility. Third, private companies can do it cheaper. They absolutely can, because NASA created the market conditions that make commercial space viable. Before NASA's commercial partnerships, private sector R&D in space was almost non-existent. NASA proved demand, shared technical risk during development, provided decades of research and development, and offered access to unique infrastructure that would be prohibitively expensive for companies to build themselves. SpaceX and other companies use Launch Complex 39A that NASA built for Apollo. They use NASA test facilities, technical expertise, and even NASA-trained personnel who transitioned to the private industry. Private companies build on this massive foundation, they don't replace it. Without NASA's continued investment in long-term research and infrastructure, the commercial space industry would lose the very foundation that makes it competitive. And who knows what innovations we'd miss out on. Now, here is to me the most illuminating criticism. Couldn't we get the same returns investing that money elsewhere? This misses why NASA returns are so high. NASA specializes in pushing the absolute boundaries of what's technically possible, the kind of high risk, long time fundamental research that creates entirely new industries. You can't build a highway and accidentally invent GPS, medical imaging, and advanced materials. NASA's specialization in solving impossible problems delivers unique economic returns that you literally cannot get by spending that money elsewhere. So is NASA worth it? The data is overwhelming. NASA is not an expense. It's one of the best investments America makes. $75.6 billion in economic output in 2023. Over 300,000 jobs supported. $9.6 billion in tax revenue generated. Technologies that touch every aspect of daily life. A commercial space industry that's become a global competitive advantage. International partnerships that project American leadership worldwide. And a pipeline of innovation and talent that ensures continued technological superiority. The question isn't whether we can afford to fund NASA. The question is whether we can afford not to. NASA represents the best of American innovation. Bold vision, technical excellence, international leadership, and tangible benefits that improve the lives of everyone. That's not just worth it, that's invaluable. If you're interested in seeing the sources, I've linked them below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and be on the lookout for my next episode of On the Radar. It's an update on the aerospace and defense industries that you're not going to want to miss.